This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program, Living Legends Collection. This interview was originally conducted by Mr. Guy Ross. The interviewee is the Reverend William J. Willis, Willis. The location of this interview is unknown. This interview is being re-recorded on June the 28th, 1985, for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
I'm talking today to Mr. William J., right? William J. Willis, who was an early-day Presbyterian minister in Oklahoma. You came to McCurtain County from, where'd you come from?
I went from Saloma Springs, Arkansas, where I pastored.
How you came in? When did you tell me you came in 1909? Came to Oklahoma in 1909.
In March 1909.
And how old were you when you came?
How old? Well,
You must have been a pretty young fella.
Well, no, let me see, that was 1909. I was born April the 12th, 1871.
1871. 30. You were in your 30s when you came, weren't you?
Yeah.
Well, tell us about what it was like when you came to McCurtain County.
When I came to Garvin, Oklahoma in 1909 to a new town that sprung up there in the past 2 or 3 years of some 1,500 people. I had held a meeting for the church, for the town, in May 1910, or 8. And then in 1909, I held a meeting and organized a Presbyterian church. I went to the pastor of the church in March of that year, and in 1910 we dedicated what was said in the newspapers to be the finest church building between Fort Smith and Texarkana, Texas. While I was pastoring that church, I often went out to Wheelock, Michigan, which our church established there way back in there when the Choctaws first come to the Indian Territory. We had a missionary, Dr. Wright, with the Choctaws in Mississippi. And when the Choctaws were moved into what is known as the Indian Territory, he went with them and established this mission school called Wheelock, and also built a church and lived with the Indians until he died. I have been out many times to the Wheelock Mission, preached for the girls because it was a girls' school, and some number between 200 and 300 girls were in that school. I preached for them in the old church that Dr. Wright built. It's an old stone building, still standing today as he left it. Then we had, the Presbyterian Church had another mission which was known as Oak Hill Mission. This mission church or school was for the Creek Indians. The Creek Indians and the Negroes intermarried until they all attended this mission and school together. And the president, appointed by the National Board of the Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, placed a nigger preacher over that school as president of the Oak Hill Academy. This minister and his wife lived in the garden. She taught a school with the niggers in the garden. He went on with his work as president of the Oak Hill Academy. He came to me one day and asked me if I would come up to the Oak Hill Academy on the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. He said almost all the pupils in this school are professed Christians, but there's quite a number that are not Christian. I want you to come and preach a sermon on Lincoln's birthday and give an opportunity for the students who are not Christians to become Christians. This I did. I preached the sermon at 11 o'clock and gave an invitation to the pupils to make the school a complete Christian school. And the minister told me afterwards that there was not a single pupil in this school then that was not members of the church.
That's wonderful.
Now, what's
Well, we've talked about the mission. Is there any thing else you think of that about the mission that would be interesting to know? How was it financed?
Financed by the board.
By the board of the Presbyterian
But,
Church.
yes, I can tell you further on that.
Okay.
The Wheelock Mission, when the state came in, the Presbyterian Board of Missions in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, turned the school over to the state. And the state still runs a school, Wheelock School.
Still there now?
Yeah. It's a girls' school, and the state supports it, runs the school, yeah.
Is it still for Creeks?
Huh?
Is it still for Creek Indians, or is it for anybody, or what now?
Well, it belongs to the state, anyone that they might invite to go out and preach to them, or they may have. I haven't been there in some time, over several years. They may have a regular chaplain now.
I'm wondering, how was mission work done over that whole part of the state? Was it done through schools in different parts of the state?
Well, at that time, it was, we had what we call mission. And always with that mission, we established the school and the church. And They board, our board, where our missions were, would pay the salaries of the teachers and support the school and all of its finances. So it was a mission school in the sense that it was supported by the Board of National Missions of the Presbyterian Church.
I see. So you came into a place where you thought the church should be established, started a church and a school. And so you...
But now, of course, as it became a state, you have no more of those mission churches. We still have another mission church we haven't turned over yet. And that's it for the, let's see now, what is there? I'll think of it very quick. What is that brightest of the Indian groups? Wheelock, Creeks, Choctaws, Creeks,
Cherokee.
Now we have a Cherokee mission yet, and the board still supports that.
So Oklahoma at that time, I guess, would have been considered a mission field because the Indians...
The whole state was a mission field for all the churches, the various churches.
Because of the large Indian population?
Yeah. And see, there's no public schools at all. In order to give education to the children of the Indians coming on to become citizens, various churches established schools or missions.
The Indians did not, this was the only schooling they had, was what the churches
That's all
provided?
they had, was a mission.
The churches then played a...
Now the Wheelock was for the Choctaws, and the Oak Hill Academy was for the Creeks, and what's the thing with this other school, mission. I held a meeting for this Cherokee mission too once. I had great results in that, in bringing the children into the church. There was no education up till the state come in, except what churches did with their mission work.
Did other churches approach mission work much the same way that the Presbyterian Church did?
Methodist, Baptist,
Through schools and so forth.
Christian church.
Well, the church then played a very important role from as far as making citizens out of making, educating the Indians, didn't they?
Well, this was a new section of the country. It was not very well settled for Curtin County. Wasn't. The whole section of the county and surrounding it were timberland. And the Chicago Company established a big sawmill at the Garden, and they built a railroad from the Garden down to the Red River to take out that timber out of the Red River bottoms. And there's a railroad, the old Choctaw Railroad, running from Ardmore across into Arkansas, that had the trees running there. And this mill, they not only made lumber of all kinds, but they also boiled logs and cut that log into this thin, what we might call it. They had a great knife, a roller knife, some 10, 12, 8, whatever the log they want. put that log into that and boil it, take it out, hook it on there and run it around and cut out a little thin piece, whole sheet. They'd cut that up and put it in the dryer and dry it out and ship it out. They also made axe handles and all kinds of things there.
Was timber the main part of the economy there?
Yeah, it was then.
Was it
Of course, there were a few farms opened up, but the town depended upon that great mill because they worked lots of hands.
Yeah.
And then finally, that went out of business, or he sold out, the company sold out to the Dirks Lumber Company. It came down there from Broken Bow, Nebraska. And they brought on this new town, Broken Bow, and named it Broken Bow, Oklahoma.
Well, I say.
And the Dirk brothers established their mills all through there, and they built 2 or 3 towns in there.
Well, was the early lumber business centered around building ties to the railroads? Was a lot of the early lumber business centered around building ties and so forth for the railroads and all that sort of thing? Then they began to build posts and things,
Yeah.
with Dirks. What
I had wonderful experiences there. One wonderful place to hunt, and I loved hunting and fishing. I hunted a lot up in the Kamish Mountains and fished in those streams, this little river, and other streams that come down out of those mountains. But I had an experience once that man by the name of Busby, he wrote a especially for the Sunday Star, Kansas City Star, Roy Busby. And he'd write up a nice article, and put in some drawings in it. Make it very interesting. Well, this experience that I had, Roy wanted me to let him write that up and send it in. I wouldn't do it. Wyatt and I were sitting on the front porch one evening, summertime. We had one little daughter that we lost there. And she was out in the yard playing, and they drove up to the front gate. 2 men in the buggy, 2 horses to the buggy, called me out, said, "We want you to get in the buggy and go with us down here about 4 miles. I want to get married." Well, it was just about sundown then. A heavy timbered country and no moon that night. Wasn't long after we started until it was dark out in that timbered country. So they turned over to me the license and the fee, and we jogged along for a little while, and they pulled up on the line and said, "Whoa," stopped right in the road. I said, "What are you stopping here for?" He said, "The girl lives right down here." He said, "You won't mind marrying a girl that eloped from over here?" I said, "Not if she's old enough." And he said, "You and my friend here, just sit here in the buggy and I'll go down and get her and bring her up here and we'll marry her right here in the road. We'll take you back to town." Well, he went down and come back and have his girl. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "She's gone down to a friend of hers in Red River Bottom." That I know where she is, and I want you to go on down there and perform the marriage ceremony. I said, "Now look at here, it's dark. And you promised to have me back home in a little while." I said, "My wife's there alone with the baby, and I don't want to go." Well, he kept persuading. He said, "I'll get you back in an hour or 2. Well, I went on down with him. He drove up to the house, got out and went in, and she wasn't there. Come back out and said the people said she'd crossed the river into Texas. We drove down to the ferry, had the ferry there, and I told him, I said, I'm not going over to Texas and marry a couple on the Oklahoma license. I just said, you wait on this side, we'll ferry and go and get her and bring her back to Oklahoma side. So I waited until 12 o'clock, he didn't show up. I said to the ferryman, I said, I'm going home. He said, how are you going? I said, I'm going to walk. Railroads come up from the town right down to this ferry. He said, you know what I wouldn't do? He said, I wouldn't go up that railroad tonight for anything. I said, why? He said, it's dangerous. And somebody might knock you off. Well, I said, I'm going home. He said, have you got a gun? I said, heck no, I don't carry a gun. But he said, I'm going to have to make you take one. So he got out an old 6-shooter. Had 6 bullets in it, and he gave me 6 more. He said, you take this lantern. So I took the lantern in the left hand, the gun in the right hand. Up that railroad I went. Nearly 12 miles. Foot. I got home just about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was scared to death, and what would become of me? And where they'd knocked me off and out. So I told her what they had done. I undressed, lay down. Just about the time I got straightened out, there come that old buggy jigging up to the front. I got out, my pajamas on, barefooted, went out there and performed the marriage ceremony and went back, went to bed.
Oh, my.
Oh, he didn't want to write that up. Finally, what he'd do, he'd have some pictures, sketches, you know, telling of the letter and a pistol. But I wouldn't let him. I said, that's too much for a preacher to get into the publicized.
He wanted to marry her bad, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, well, I had more fields there. That was off the climate. Then half the children that were born in that town and around the town died. We lost our little daughter there. But my 2 boys were born there. Jim, who was with the WKY-TV, and Leroy, Dr. Leroy, a dentist, with his clinic over on 1901. What is that? Depot, Harry Depot.
Yeah.
Well, he has his clinic.
What caused so many people to die?
Huh?
What caused so many deaths?
Malaria,
Is that right?
hot weather in the summertime. I've seen it on 118.
Who was it? Adults get it too, or was it mostly children?
Well, the adults, it wasn't so hard on them. They'd get yellow jaundice. Lots of people had yellow jaundice. The water we had when the town was first built was all tank water. Every home had a big tank, with maybe a whole 1,000 to 2,000 gallons of water. And they'd take the water off of the house, from the main to that tank, and that's the water they used all summer.
They drank?
Yeah. If they didn't boil it, and have all kinds of weaknesses in it and everything.
Where'd they haul it from?
Huh?
Did they haul it from springs or ponds or what? That they hauled in?
No, they take it up there off the house. Ranging on, they put on their guttering around and run it into these tanks.
Was that the only source of water?
That was the only source of water that we had to use until we built the waterworks. We built the waterworks and took water out of the Little River.
What happened if it didn't rain enough? Was there ever
Huh?
was there ever a drought? You know, when it didn't rain enough to provide the water?
Oh, there'd sometimes be a month or so of drought, but most had a lot of rain there.
Oh.
Down between those rivers, Little River and Red River.
You were talking about the Indian missions a while ago. I was wondering if the Indians presented very many problems. If it presented very many problems teaching them as far as the language barrier.
No, they got along very, very nicely with the children, you know, soon learn the English language. The older ones were the ones that I hardest understand,
Yeah.
get along with. But the children, after they'd be in school a while, they could speak the English all right.
Were they? I wonder. I guess they would learn as fast. Wouldn't be any difference in the speed that they'd learn from white kids, or would
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Indian is a different personality to the white friend. I'd go out to that Wheelock mission tree sometime, maybe this year it'd be 200 a little better, and maybe the next year it'd be more. But those children would go out on the playgrounds and wouldn't make as much fuss on the playgrounds as half a dozen of our American children would make out here at one of the public schools. They get in bunches over here, over there, groups around, and just talk, you know.
just talk?
Talk, they make no fuss, never holler, squall, or anything.
They didn't play? And
No, holler, talk, you know, and quiet. And then when the bell rang, they'd all move in back in.
did they act that way in class?
Yeah.
Did you do any teaching in the missions?
Huh?
Did you do any teaching in the missions?
No, I didn't do any teaching there. I knew all of the faculty very well. I had a very nice time with them. And then I spoke to the classes, spoken to the classes, and then on Sundays afternoon I'd preach for them in the old Wheelock church. But now preaching to the Indians, you get the more response from them than you would preaching to a lot of stumps.
Is that right?
Just as quiet, they would look at you, head down. And if they made a move, when I'd call for a confession, come forward, they just get right up and walk down. There wasn't any fuss about it.
No, that'd be just the opposite of
Yeah,
what you.
just opposite. I said,
Well, did they live? Did the Indians live in clusters, reservation, or on different farms, or
well,
around there?
they had opened up a little farm. When they went out there early, you know, they made most of their living beast and killing game. But they'd open up a little farm and raise a little corn enough to make their meal. And now they made their bread, not at the grist mill, but they had a big round stone hauled out here and put that corn in there and take a pestle like that, beat that corn up into pieces as big as that, you know. They put that over in the water, big container, and let it stay, and then it ferments. They take that out and make it into a bread, and cook it big.
You said ferment. Did they ever make anything stronger than bread out of the corn?
Oh, I guess they did. I guess they had a little hoosh along with it. And then they hang up their meat, kill a beef, hang it out in the timber out there, dress, hang it to a limb on a tree, let it hang there and dry. Then they would shave it off and try to cook it. I attended Presbyterian at one of the Indian churches.
You said ferment. Did they ever make anything stronger than bread out of the corn?
Oh, I guess they did. I guess they had a little hoosh along with it. And then they hang up their meat, kill a beef, hang it out in the timber out there, dress, hang it to a limb on a tree, let it hang there and dry. Then they would shave it off and try to cook it. I attended Presbyterian at one of the Indian churches. While I was pastoring there, I was attended more than once, but this time we were way out in the country, away from everything. These Indians out there had prepared, they always made some great ado about meeting with a Presbyterian in one of their churches. They were members at that time of our Presbyterian. Those Indian ministers were. Afterwards, we changed and give them a Presbyterian to their own, for their own, together. But they made great preparation, and they had this old sour bread. And about the second day out there, it turned down on me, and I like to went out, sick, cold,
Man, I imagine.
fire.
Did they preached obviously in the native language of the Indians, I guess, too.
I had a doctor there, Dr. Ben Dennison. He brought my older boy and Roy, the two boys. He attended my wife when they were born. And this old doctor, he weighed about 225 pounds. He's that big man. He married an Indian. And she was a bright girl. She was educated one of our missions. She was a bright woman. And he told me, I had lots of stories about the Indians. Told me one where he got a call one night. Doc, the Indian said, Doc, come over here quick. He said, my son, he went to Bucktucolo. Bucktucolo is the name for two rivers. That's where they'd have their big meetings sometimes. He said he went to Bucktucolo and they killed 2 cow heads over there. Instead of saying they killed 2 head of cattle, he put it 2 cow heads. And he said he ate so much of that meat he broke his ass. Come and fix it quick. And the scours. Told about one of the experiences that he had a call to deliver an Indian baby. And Little River was just as solid as timber. All the timber's tall and big and thick. And the roads ran around through the trees that going through that bottom. And they had to ferry the little river there to cross it. Well, he had a horse and buggy, and he took his horse to the buggy that night to go over to deliver this baby. Ferried the river, got out into that bottom, and the horse got lost and wound around and got mixed up in a treetop and fallen down in his buggy, and he couldn't get out. So we just sat there and waited till it could become light so he could see. He got out and drove on up, had a little hut up here on the point of the hill, real fence around it, gateway off down there from the house. Doc drove up to the gate and got out, started in. The young husband came to the door and come out on the steps. He said, "Doc, we can come now, go back home." He jumped out. My name is W.J. Willis. I was born April the 12th, 1871, in Wayland Springs, Lawrence County, Tennessee. I grew up and attended the Royal Schools and worked with and for the family. My father died when I was 8 years old. I'm the youngest of 7 boys and 3 girls. When I was 20 years old, I felt the call to the ministry. The rest of the family of children had married and moved away and left me to support and take care of my widowed mother and my youngest sister. When I felt the call to the ministry, I realized what a proposition was before me. I felt my responsibility to my mother and sister, and also I felt that the Lord wanted me to surrender my life to Him in the ministry. I finally told my mother about the burden of my mind. She said to me, "Son, you hear the call of the ministry, of the Lord to the ministry. The Lord will care for us. We can go and live with the married children." I went to school for 4 years, college for 4 years, and ended up in Nashville, Tennessee, in the Peabody Normal. Then, in fall of 1899, I entered the theological department of the Cumberland Presbyterian University in Lebanon, Tennessee. When I had graduated on May the 8th, 1901, I accepted a call to Sheffield, Alabama, where I spent 1 year as a pastor of the church. Then I accepted a call to Bethany, Missouri, Well, I spent 3 years as pastor of the church there. When on June the 4th, 1933, I was married to Ella E. Eschman in Lewisburg, Tennessee. During my ministry, in the first year of my married life, I was happy because my wife was loved by the congregation. But this happiness was not to continue long, for on September the 3rd, at 8 o'clock in the evening, just 15 months to a day and hour, she died in childbirth. And both the child and the wife lies buried in the cemetery in Lewisburg, Tennessee. From this pastorate, I went to Salome Springs, Arkansas, where I pastored for several years. And then in March 1909, I accepted a call to the church at Garden, Oklahoma, where I built a beautiful church which stands today as a monument to my work in that city. From there, I went to Aurora, Missouri, where I had a 6 years pastorate. And in the meantime, built another church for the congregation there. And in November the 10th, 1918, I was called to the church at Kearney, Nebraska, where I spent 7 years and built a church for that congregation. Leaving the pastorate there, I was called to enter the field to raise an endowment for Hastings College at Hastings, Nebraska. The college was short $400,000. They must get this in order to stay in the North Central Association of Colleges and Universities. 2 years' time was allotted to me to raise this $400,000. The territory that belongs to the college was Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming. For the nearly 2 years, I lived in my car over this territory. But finally, the last day of this allotted time, the college board met, and I met the board and announced to them that the amount had been raised. So I left the college and went to Great Bend, Kansas, where I had a 3 years pastorate. Then from there to Superior, Nebraska, where I had a 3 years pastorate, And then from there to Nevada, Missouri, where I had a 6 years pastorate. And then from there to Crane, Missouri, where I had a 13 years pastorate. And in the meantime, I built us a home in Aurora, Missouri, and commuted to my work at Crane, which was 13 miles away. Following the pastors at Crane for 13 years, I accepted a call to 2 churches, Union Presbyterian Church, a country church, and the village church, Hobart, Missouri, where I served at these churches for 13 years. On March the 28th, 1965, I resigned my work to retire from the ministry. And then I went to Alexandria, Virginia, make my home with my daughter. What happened to an accident that caused a slight shock that affected both feet and right hand. Through the boys who live here in this city, I was brought here to this rest home for a while. I don't know how long.
Yes. How long you been here?
Since the 2nd of last July.
2nd of last July. It's about 6 months. Do you, as a minister, do you think that the work of preaching has changed any from when you were early?
Somehow, that depends upon. Now, like myself, I'd be called an old minister and preaching the old gospel. I believe in it. But now you've got a younger set of preachers coming along. That, in a sense, to me, is considerably jazzy.
Jazzy. That's an interesting word.
And now running off after such things that God is dead, or God is not dead, and arguing such issues that is rot. But we're having that now. We're having a lot of it. And many of our seminaries are leading our young men away from the real gospel ministry. There are very few evangelistic churches now. The Baptist Church is the most evangelistic church we have in Protestantism, and it's growing faster than any church we have in Protestantism too. Now they're still preaching the old gospel. But the Methodist Church, Presbyterian Church, my church, has been led away from evangelism for what they call one get one.
Call what?
One get one. That is, you go and get somebody. They don't believe in evangelism in the sense of large great meetings. 2 last churches I built from the result of 2 great campaigns. Dr. Charles Reed's School with the Company of 8 came to Aurora, Missouri in 1915 when all the churches went together And we built a board tabernacle. And he held a month's meeting and practically turned that town upside down. All the churches had to double in membership. I went ahead and built a new church from it. When I went to Kearney, Nebraska, I found the same thing there, following the First World War. Spirited that the churches are all dead. So I began to work among the ministers of the town. We had an alliance of the ministers to get them to get someone to come and hold a great church-wide, city-wide campaign. All churches going into it. So they agreed, and we brought Dr. Ray Scoville there and his company. And another month he spent and did the same what he did at Aurora, Missouri. And I followed that meeting and built another great church. My church grew from 62 members in the Sunday school. The first Sunday I was there with a membership of 160. After my 7 years' work in the new church, I had an average attendance of 500 in Sunday school and better than 600 members in the church. But I built a church to meet the condition of the time. I had a modern church. The only church I ever served at was what I wanted. I had a bowling alley in the church. I had a gymnasium. I had a shower bath. I had a big dining hall. And all these things went together. And every night of the week, that church was open to some part of the work. Wednesday night was church night. Everybody had their meetings on Wednesday night in the church. Monday night, the young married people would bowl. The youngsters would play ball, basketball. Maybe that night, older married people, or the young men and the young women would bowl. And so it was every night. And as a result, of course, we had to put a rule on that only those that were members of the Sunday school and church had any right to use our facilities. But they just come in droves. And we had a wonderful church there.
You think doing that helped the church?
Hmm?
You think doing that helped the church to grow?
Why, yes. The trouble here today is our churches are not taking very much attention to taking care of the social life of our young people. They walk these road houses. And drive-ins. Church is not giving them anything. You can't blame the young people for wanting to go somewhere, have some church, have some life, fun. If they can come to the church, bowl, not cost them anything, play basketball, play volleyball, have a good dinner.
Do you think that the role, you spoke a while ago about that there are not very many evangelistic churches now. Do you think that the role of the preacher over the last 70 years has changed from evangelist to something like counselor or something else?
Yeah, the ministers have changed. They're not evangelistic. Oh, this Presbyterian church over here, this man that was in here was the pastor. Come in here and brought me these books. He comes over once in a while to see me. I don't suppose he ever had a revival in his church. They wouldn't know what a revival was. They used to get back to some of these good old mothers and fathers And the spirit that they used to have in the revival meetings and shout a little, they'd jump out the window and leave. I had an experience in Rawhide, Alabama. Held a meeting there. There's a town there in Rawhide, you know, there's a program on Rawhide.
Yeah.
Well, there's a town called Rawhide. I had a meeting there once. Methodist church. I was pastoring over at Sheffield, across the river. Well, the minister, a Methodist minister, come to Sheffield and wanted me to come over and hold a meeting for him. Well, we set the time. I went over, began the meeting on Sunday night. I preached in night church in the morning. Went over and preached in his church that night, opened the meeting. Well, the house was full every time. We had two services, 11 o'clock in daytime and the evening service. I sat right down on about the middle of the way, on the aisle, on this side. A woman that caught my attention. And I'd get up in that pulpit to preach, she never took her eyes off it. She just held them there. And then one day, at the 11 o'clock service, she jumped up and went around and patted her hand, shake hands, patting her hand. I said to the pastor after the meeting was over, I said, who is that lady that made that look around there, maybe patting her hand and all? He said, that's one of the best Christian women in this church. He says she's deaf and dumb. And she reads your lips. She gets every word you say. And her soul run over with joy. No, getting too far away in my judgment, but they call me an old fogey. Preacher. But I built up every church and membership in the Sunday school and church that I served. Besides the building of the churches, I built 5 churches and 2 men's ministers' homes. I built 2 churches in Tennessee while I was in college.
Did you find the church to be any different as you moved from different places?
Mm-hmm.
Did you find the church to be different, very much different in one section of in Oklahoma, Tennessee, or Missouri, or was it all the same?
No, about the same. None of them, except, as I say, the Baptist, Methodist, not evangelistic anymore. They used to be called the Shouting Methodists.
Yeah.
But they don't. They're not evangelistic. Presbyterian not evangelistic. I was raised in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church.
This is Guy Ross, and this tape is an interview that I made on the 2nd of February 1967 with Mr. William J. Willis, who is a retired Presbyterian preacher. He's 97 years old. His mind is still very alert. On the other side of the tape, he reflects on having come to Oklahoma, to McCurtain County in 1909, and reflects particularly on mission work among the Presbyterian church, in the Presbyterian church among the Indians. He tells several interesting incidents and casts some light on how they worked among the Indians. On this side of the tape, he reflects on his life as a minister, talks about the difference in the ministry now as opposed to several years ago. He looks on the ministry from the viewpoint of one who has preached for 70 years.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
You'd like to hear yourself take medicine on a tape recorder?
Huh?